Welcome back to Snooker Mentalist channel. So this is a new series I'm starting looking at the Mavericks of snooker.
In that, way I think someone who is a maverick, someone who does that to the system.
So I'm starting with Bill Werbeniuk. Now, I can't explain it as well as the podcast Snooker Scene does. So Dave Hendon and Phil Yates have got some great stories. So I'm going to put them on now. If you're not subscribed to them on Spotify or iTunes, subscribe to that podcast. They're having a break at the moment, but the Snooker Scene podcast is brilliant. So I'll put some clips up of Bill Werbeniuk playing while Dave Hendon and Phil Yates talk and tell stories about him. But here on screen at the moment are just some of the highlights of why I've highlighted him as a maverick. I think my favourite one is claiming beer as a tax expense. Just a brilliant guy as well. He was absolutely loved on the tour. There's loads of footage of him hugging all the players and things like that. Just a brilliant player. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll hand you over now to Dave Hendon and Phil Yates on the Snooker Scene podcast.
Werbeniuk, he's always one whose name is brought up when people reminisce, as sort of broadsheet columnists do most weeks, about how great snooker used to be and it isn't now. That sort of whole agenda that they have. But actually, for me, I remember watching him. He wasn't that great to watch, was he? He was pretty methodical.
He was, absolutely. No doubt about it. Stevens was definitely the most attractive of that bunch of Canadians at that time. Oh no, Bill was a hard nut like Cliff. But he was tough to play. I'll tell you what, he was an extraordinary player in terms of cue ball power. He could screw that ball back in, play the shot to nothing, pot of red and screw back into bulk. Did that on numerous occasions. I remember once the late Alex Higgins was touting around for someone to play for money at Pontins, and Bill said, "I'll play you," and he absolutely cleaned Higgins out. Tough competitor.
But also, he's probably one of the only players who could outdrink Alex as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, let's face it, Bill Werbeniuk outdrunk Eddie Sinclair. That's all you need to know. They had a drinking contest, and he literally drank Eddie under the table, literally. And then
I think it was something like 40 pints each, and he won on the last pint or something.
exactly.
Yeah.
Eddie was finished. Bill got up, right as rain, and said, "What we're going to do now? I know, we'll go down the pub and have a drink." I mean, these aren't exaggerated stories. The other thing with Werbeniuk, of course, was for 1 year, because he was based in Britain, he was paying British income tax. For 1 year, he claimed his lager against his income tax bill as a necessary expense for his job, because he wasn't able to take the beta blocker Inderal. It was supposed to have quelled an hereditary tremor in his cue arm. Wasn't able to take the Inderal because the beta blocker became part of the IOC banned drugs. So consequently, had to do something else about it. So he was drinking copious amounts of lager, and he was claiming for 1 year, I know for certain, against his income tax. The other thing was, of course, back in those days, morning starts were very, very unusual. Basically, it was the Crucible, and that was it. So when he played at the Crucible and he was on in a morning session, he had to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to drink enough beer to be able to play.
Proper sportsman, you see, preparing for it. Well, I know someone who, because he lived in a sort of mobile home for a time, and someone went round, I think, to interview him and to wash their hands or something in the sink, and they turned the tap on, and he had literally had beer coming out the tap. I mean, literally had beer on tap.
That's right, absolutely. Lager coming out the taps. It was just extraordinary. The last couple of matches I remember seeing him play in the World Qualifiers at the Norbrook Castle Hotel in Blackpool. The first one was against Ian Black, who was a legendary drinker himself.
Scottish player, yeah.
And they went one frame between them. They went to the toilet 5 times in one frame. So under this new guidelines now about going to the toilet very sparingly, God knows whatever they were done then. But after that match, he won that, just about scraped through. Then he had to play a very youthful Nigel Bond, who basically wiped the floor with him. And afterwards he came in and he said, "Well, I've just drunk 12 pints of extra strong lager and had 6 double whiskies, and I'm still not drunk," you know. And I always remember at the time the Sun had a guest doctor column, Dr. Vernon Coleman, the guy was called, who was appearing on TV over here on a regular basis, and he documented all of the possible side effects of drinking so much alcohol that Bill faced. And I suppose the doctor was proved right in the end, because Bill left us in untimely fashion.
Some great stories there That was crazy about him getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning so he can drink enough beer. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening. Obviously, this is going to be a new series, so Bill Werbeniuk's just the first one. In that last clip, he's playing Alex Higgins, so obviously there's going to be a video on him, probably the greatest Maverick. But thanks for listening, and see you next time.